It's funny how the world feels different after dark. Emily Parker knew every crack and pothole on Maple Avenue, but at night, even under streetlights, the familiar turned strange. Her sneakers tapped along the sidewalk, the sound sharp and solitary, echoing back at her with every step. Next to her, Rex padded silently, his thick black and tan coat bristling every time a car passed too slowly. Emily, 22 and stubbornly independent, told herself she wasn't afraid. She'd walked this route 100 times, even after losing her dad, even after the nightmares started. But tonight, with autumn wind hissing through empty branches and her keys clutched between her fingers, Emily's chest tightened. What would Dad say? Stay alert, Em. Trust your gut. But her gut had never included a dog until 2 weeks ago. Rex, the German shepherd she'd adopted on impulse, was a paradox. Gentle in the kitchen, fierce at the door. His eyes, sharp amber beneath floppy ears, followed every movement. He wasn't like the other shelter dogs. He rarely barked. He never cowered. And when the neighbor's pit bull snapped at the fence, Rex just stared, cool and unflinching. Emily kept walking, glancing down at the leash. "You know, you're supposed to make me feel safe," she muttered, forcing a laugh. Rex's tail swished, but he stayed focused on the shadows. Something about him was different tonight. Tense, alert. Half a block from her apartment, Emily's phone buzzed. A text from her roommate asking where she was. She typed a quick reply, looked up. That's when she heard it. The squeal of tires on wet asphalt. A black van, headlights off, barreled around the corner, stopping hard at the curb. The van door slid open before the vehicle even fully stopped. 2 men, both in hoodies, faces obscured, leaped out, one heading straight for her. Everything froze. For one horrible moment, Emily's legs locked. The taller man lunged, grabbing her arm. "Let go!" she shouted, swinging her backpack, but his grip tightened, cold and calloused, reeking of sweat and motor oil. The second man circled behind, blocking her escape. Rex exploded. There was no bark, no hesitation, just a blur of muscle and fangs. He launched at the man holding Emily, his jaws clamping down with a force that made the attacker scream. Blood spattered as Rex shook, refusing to let go. The second man cursed, swinging a crowbar, but Rex pivoted, placing himself between Emily and both men. For the first time in her life, Emily saw what true protection looked like. Rex's movements were sharp, almost practiced. He didn't just attack, he targeted, a knee here, an arm there, disabling without hesitation. The taller man managed to shove Rex away for a second, stumbling back toward the van, yelling for his partner to get the gun. Emily's heart hammered so loudly she could barely hear herself think. Adrenaline surged. She yanked her phone from her pocket, fumbling as she tried to dial 911. The second man lunged at her, grabbing for the leash, but Rex intercepted him with a vicious snap, driving the man back toward the van's open door. Suddenly, blue and red lights slashed across the darkness. Police sirens wailed, closer than she'd realized. The 2 men scrambled into the van, slamming the door. The van screeched off, fishtailing as it sped away. Emily sank to the sidewalk, gasping, shaking so hard her teeth rattled. Rex stood over her, growling softly, hackles raised. His front leg was bleeding, a shallow gash from the crowbar, but he barely seemed to notice. He sniffed her face, then pressed his nose to her palm, as if checking she was alive. Emily stared at him, her mind spinning. That wasn't just instinct. Rex had moved like he'd done this before. Every motion was deliberate, controlled, almost as if he'd been trained. The first officer rushed over, kneeling beside her. "Ma'am, are you hurt?" She shook her head, too numb to answer. Another officer approached, flashlight glinting off Rex's eyes. For a moment, everyone froze. Rex towering over Emily, jaw bloodied but calm, standing guard. One officer started to step forward, hand on his gun, but Emily grabbed his sleeve. "He's not dangerous. He saved me." As more officers arrived, Rex finally relaxed, sitting beside Emily, keeping his body between her and the crowd. She hugged him, burying her face in his fur, tears streaming down her cheeks. The adrenaline was wearing off, replaced by waves of panic and relief. The police took statements, asked her to describe the men, the van, everything she remembered. Emily answered, voice shaky, still clutching Rex's collar. The officers kept exchanging glances, not just at the crime scene, but at Rex. One even muttered, "That's no ordinary dog." As an ambulance arrived and EMTs checked her over, Emily caught herself glancing at Rex. He didn't flinch at the chaos. Sirens, radios, strangers. He sat, watching, eyes never leaving her. It hit her. Rex hadn't hesitated. He'd thrown himself between her and danger, without a second thought. When she finally stood, the officer who seemed to be in charge, a grizzled detective with a heavy coat and tired eyes, approached. "You said you just adopted him?" Emily nodded, suddenly self-conscious. "From the city shelter. They said he was a stray. He felt right." The detective knelt beside Rex, peering at his collar, then at the faint scars crisscrossing his fur. "Sometimes, Miss Parker, the right dog finds you." As the night wore on and the chaos faded, one question haunted Emily's mind. Who had Rex been before he became her protector? And what other secrets did her silent guardian keep? Unbeknownst to her, this was just the beginning. The harsh fluorescent lights of the police station buzzed overhead, casting everything in a cold, clinical glow. Emily sat on the edge of a cracked vinyl chair, still clutching Rex's leash as if letting go would cause her whole world to collapse. Rex lay at her feet, ears perked, eyes sweeping the room. His earlier ferocity was gone, replaced by a calm readiness that unsettled everyone who passed by. Officers moved around the lobby, glancing over at Emily and Rex with a mix of awe and unease. Occasionally, one would whisper to another, gesturing at Rex, and Emily caught snatches of their conversation. "Did you see how he took them down? Not your average pet, that's for sure." Even the front desk sergeant, a large man with a bushy mustache and an air of seen-it-all fatigue, seemed wary as he processed Emily's statement. Detective Mark Russell, a tall man in his late 40s with graying hair at his temples, emerged from a back hallway. He approached quietly, his badge glinting in the light, and crouched beside Rex, studying him closely. Rex didn't move, only met the detective's gaze with those unwavering amber eyes. "Miss Parker," the detective began, his voice low and gentle, as if not wanting to startle either of them. "I'd like to ask you a few more questions about what happened tonight, if you're up for it." Emily nodded, still feeling the echo of fear pounding in her veins. "Of course," she whispered. Her throat was tight. "Anything to help." Detective Russell led her into a small interview room, its single window looking out onto a dark parking lot. He sat across from her, laying a battered manila folder on the table. "We're trying to piece together why those men targeted you," he said, watching her carefully. "Tell me everything, every detail, no matter how small." Emily recounted the attack, her voice trembling at first, but growing steadier as she relived the moments. She described the van, the men's voices, the license plate she glimpsed as they sped away. She mentioned her phone, which the attackers had tried to grab. When she explained that she'd snapped a photo of the van earlier in the evening, something about it had seemed suspicious. Detective Russell's expression grew serious. "That photo could be important," he said, jotting a note. "You may have caught something these men desperately want to hide." He turned his attention to Rex, who sat quietly at Emily's feet. "You said you only adopted Rex recently?" Emily nodded. 2 weeks ago. He was in the shelter. No records. Just a stray, supposedly. She stroked Rex's head, feeling the familiar comfort of his fur. "But tonight, he wasn't just protecting me. He knew exactly what to do." Detective Russell pursed his lips, thoughtful. "Let me show you something." He reached into his folder and slid a faded photograph across the table. Emily leaned in. The image showed a younger Rex, sleeker but unmistakably the same dog, sitting beside a uniformed man, his paw resting on the man's boot. The man's badge gleamed in the sunlight, and the words, "K9 Unit, Captain Gabriel Mendez," were written on the bottom. Emily stared, stunned. "That's Rex?" The detective nodded. "Your dog isn't just any stray. He's a retired police K9, one of the best we ever had on the force. That man with him was Captain Mendez, killed in the line of duty last year. We thought Rex went missing after that. Looks like he found his way back to the world in his own way." Emily looked down at Rex, who gazed up at her almost apologetically. For the first time, she saw him not just as her protector, but as a soldier carrying scars of his own. Detective Russell's tone turned grim. "Those men tonight. Our task force has been tracking them for months. They're part of a human trafficking ring operating throughout the city. They don't leave witnesses. You said you photographed their van. That makes you a target. We believe they tracked you, maybe even staked out your building. You need to be extremely careful from here on out." Emily swallowed hard, her hands trembling. The reality settled on her shoulders like a weight. This wasn't just a random mugging. She was caught in something far more dangerous than she'd imagined. "But why would Rex react that way?" she asked, voice barely above a whisper. It was like he knew, like he'd been waiting for something like this. Detective Russell offered a weary smile. "Some dogs never forget their training, and some bonds, like the one Rex had with his handler, leave a mark that never fades. When he saw you in danger, those instincts kicked in. You're his person now, Emily." The detective stood, pulling his jacket tighter. "We're going to need you to stay somewhere safe. We can assign a patrol car outside your apartment. Or, if you'd prefer, you can stay at a police outpost tonight. These men don't give up easily." Emily hesitated, then looked at Rex, who nudged her hand with his nose. She nodded. "We'll stay at the outpost. I trust Rex, but I don't want to take any chances." As she followed the detective down the hallway, past rows of silent desks and bulletin boards covered in wanted posters, she couldn't shake the feeling that her life had split into before and after. The normalcy she'd clung to was gone. In its place stood a silent, loyal guardian, one who had already saved her once, and who, she sensed, would do it again if needed. That night, as Emily settled into the uncomfortable cot at the police outpost, Rex curled up at her side, head on his paws, always facing the door. Emily stared at the ceiling, her mind racing with questions, memories, and fear. She reached down and ran her fingers through Rex's fur, grounding herself in the warmth of his presence. Somewhere in the darkness outside, evil still prowled. But tonight, Emily wasn't alone. She had a hero with a hidden past, and she'd soon learn just how much she'd need him. The clock on the wall clicked past midnight, its ticking sharp in the stillness of the police outpost. Emily tried to rest, but her eyes refused to close for more than a few seconds at a time. Each time her eyelids fluttered, memories of the night's attack came crashing back. Gloved hands grabbing her, the gleam of a crowbar, Rex lunging into chaos. She reached down and found comfort in Rex's warm fur, his steady breathing the only thing that felt real anymore. Outside, rain drummed against the windows, smearing the orange glow of the streetlights. Inside, the air felt stale and heavy, thick with the scent of burnt coffee and cleaning supplies. Detective Russell had checked in on her an hour ago, giving her a reassuring nod and a quiet reminder to lock the door and call if anything seemed off. Emily was grateful for his presence, but she could sense the tension in his voice, the way he kept glancing at the windows. Rex lay between her and the door, head up, muscles tense beneath his thick coat. He hadn't slept. Not really. Every so often, his ears would prick at the sound of footsteps in the hallway or a car passing outside. It was as if he knew something was coming, something neither of them could see. At 2:13 a.m., the outpost's landline rang, shattering the silence. One of the two officers on duty picked up, murmured a few words, then scribbled something on a notepad. Emily watched through the open doorway, her nerves raw. The officer looked up and caught her gaze, forcing a tired smile. "Just routine checks," he said, but the way he gripped the phone told another story. Minutes dragged by. Emily tried scrolling through her phone, but the screen felt useless. Her friends' texts, her social media feed, all the normal things in her life felt impossibly distant now. She wondered if she should text her mom, or if that would only make her more afraid. A loud crash erupted at the back of the building, a door slamming open, glass breaking. Shouts echoed down the hallway. Instantly, Rex leapt to his feet, barking, short, sharp, commanding. Emily's heart pounded. She scrambled off the cot, grabbing her backpack, her mind racing. The officers shouted for backup, but their voices sounded strained, panicked. Before she could react, Rex was at her side, nudging her toward the window at the far end of the room. He barked once, then darted to the door, waiting for her to follow. The outpost was small, only a handful of rooms and a narrow back hallway leading to the alley. Emily hesitated, torn between fear and adrenaline. Then another crash, a gunshot this time, impossibly loud, shoved her into action. "Go," she whispered, swinging her backpack over her shoulder and following Rex. The German Shepherd moved like a shadow, guiding her through the maze of desks and file cabinets. Another officer yelled her name from down the hall. "Emily, stay down!" But she could see the fear in his eyes. The building shook as heavy footsteps approached. Emily ducked behind a supply cabinet, clutching her phone. Rex pressed close, his body a wall of warmth and protection. Through a crack in the door, she saw the first attacker. One of the men from the van, face now revealed, jaw set in a hard, determined line. He held a pistol and swept it across the room, searching. Rex growled. Low, guttural, deadly. Emily's breath caught. The man turned at the sound, raising his weapon, but Rex lunged, teeth flashing. The man fired once, missing wide, and Rex knocked him backward, sending the gun skittering across the floor. The other officer tackled the man, struggling to subdue him, but more voices echoed down the hallway, at least two more intruders, desperate and reckless. Emily knew they were here for her. She looked down at Rex. "We have to go," she whispered, her voice trembling. Rex seemed to understand. He pushed her toward the back exit, limping slightly but never faltering. They dashed through the back hallway, ducking as another shot rang out. Shattering a window above their heads, glass rained down, cutting Emily's arm. She barely noticed. She followed Rex out the emergency exit, bursting into the rain-soaked alley behind the building. Detective Russell appeared out of the darkness, gun drawn, jacket soaked. "Emily, over here!" he called. Rex darted ahead, leading Emily to the detective's side. Russell pressed her behind a dumpster for cover, his face drawn and tense. "They're everywhere," he muttered. "We have to move now." The trio moved together, sticking to the shadows. Rain hammered down, turning the alley into a river of muddy water. Emily's shoes slipped, but Russell caught her arm, steadying her. Rex scanned every shadow, every flicker of movement, ignoring his own pain. Behind them, the chaos inside the outpost reached a fever pitch. Sirens blaring, radios crackling, officers calling for backup. But in the maze of alleys, Emily realized just how vulnerable she was. The city felt massive, indifferent. Danger lurked around every corner. They darted from one dark doorway to the next, hearts pounding, nerves shot. A car screeched to a halt at the end of the block. Another black van, headlights glaring. "Get down," Russell hissed, pushing Emily behind a stack of crates. Rex positioned himself in front of her, growling, hackles up. The van's doors opened. Men jumped out, searching the shadows, shouting to each other. One of them spotted Russell. "There!" A shot rang out, ricocheting off brick. Russell returned fire, yelling for Emily to run. She hesitated, torn between fear and the urge to fight back. But Rex nudged her leg, barking as if to say, "Trust me." Together, they sprinted down the alley, dodging garbage bins and puddles, adrenaline propelling them forward. The rain stung her eyes. Behind them, the men gave chase, shouting, their footsteps slapping against the wet pavement. For the first time, Emily understood the depth of the danger she was in. These men would stop at nothing to silence her. She realized how much she relied on Rex, on his instincts and unwavering loyalty. He wasn't just a dog. He was her only shield in a world gone suddenly, terrifyingly dark. At the end of the alley, they found a locked gate. Emily fumbled with the latch, hands shaking, as Rex barked and Detective Russell covered them, firing back at their pursuers. Finally, the gate gave way. They stumbled through, slamming it shut behind them. Russell locked it, breathing hard. They ducked into a narrow stairwell, hearts racing, as the footsteps faded into the distance. For a moment there was silence, broken only by the sound of the rain and the distant wail of approaching sirens. Emily pressed her back against the wall, shaking, tears streaming down her face. Rex nuzzled her hand, his fur damp but his eyes as fierce and steady as ever. "We're not safe," Emily whispered, voice raw. "Not anywhere." But she looked at Rex, and she knew she wasn't alone. For as long as he stood by her side, she still had a fighting chance. The storm had passed, but the city felt eerily empty as Emily, Detective Russell, and Rex hurried through the tangled back streets. Wet pavement reflected neon signs and the sickly glow of streetlights. Emily's heart hadn't slowed since the ambush at the police outpost. Every shadow seemed to pulse with danger, every distant shout a threat. They couldn't go home. They couldn't go to the station. There was nowhere left but the fringes. They slipped through a chain-link fence into a forgotten industrial lot, its boundaries marked by rusted cars and toppled pallets. A block away, the screech of tires reminded them their pursuers hadn't given up. Russell kept a sharp eye on the street, his hand never leaving his weapon. Rex stayed close, limping now, but refusing to slow down or let Emily fall behind. Russell found a way into a crumbling brick warehouse, its windows broken and its doors hanging loose. Inside, the air was thick with dust, the silence broken by the occasional drip of water from the leaking roof. "We'll hold up here," Russell whispered, guiding Emily toward a corner cluttered with old crates. If they find us, we have cover. If they don't, we wait for backup. Emily nodded, trying to steady her breathing. Her hands shook as she tucked her soaked hair behind her ears. "I'm so sorry about all this," she managed, voice thin. "You don't have to," Russell cut her off with a gentle but urgent tone. "This isn't your fault, Emily. Those men would have hurt someone somewhere. Tonight just happened to be your night. Now it's our job to survive it." As the detective checked his phone for a signal, Emily knelt beside Rex, who had finally allowed himself to settle, tongue lolling, a faint trace of blood on his foreleg. She pulled a handkerchief from her backpack and dabbed at the wound, her hands gentle. "Hang in there, big guy," she whispered. "I need you." Rex looked up at her, eyes warm and trusting, and pressed his head into her palm. That small act, his vulnerability, even in pain, unlocked something inside her. Memories of her father's lessons flooded back. How to protect herself. How to keep her wits in a crisis. She scanned the room, searching for anything she could use. On a nearby shelf, she spotted a metal pipe, its end bent but sturdy. She gripped it, surprised by its weight, and felt a flicker of resolve. Russell knelt at her side. "If they come in, you stay behind me. But if you have to fight," he nodded at the pipe in her hands, "don't hesitate." Suddenly, the sound of footsteps crunched on broken glass near the entrance. Voices drifted in, low, angry, growing closer. "They're here," Emily whispered. Her heart thudded in her chest, but the fear was edged now with steel. Russell motioned for silence and crouched behind a stack of crates, gun drawn. Emily pressed herself into the shadows, gripping the pipe with both hands. Rex, despite his limp, stood at her side, hackles raised. The door banged open, crashing against the wall. Flashlight beams swept the darkness, cutting through the dust and dancing over the broken floor. Two men entered, weapons drawn, their faces twisted in determination. "Check the back," one barked. Another pair of footsteps echoed as a third man joined them, blocking their only escape route. For a long, breathless moment, everyone was still. Emily felt sweat bead on her forehead, her grip slick. Rex growled, deep and threatening, and the men hesitated, exchanging nervous glances. "Get rid of the dog," one muttered. In a heartbeat, everything erupted. The first man rushed Russell's position, gun raised. Russell fired, the shot deafening in the confined space. The attacker ducked, grazing his shoulder, and returned fire. Emily stayed low, heart pounding, as the second man advanced, sweeping the flashlight toward her hiding place. He spotted her. "There!" He lunged, grabbing for her arm, but Emily twisted, swinging the pipe with every ounce of strength she had. The metal connected with a crack. The man yelped, dropping his weapon, and Rex lunged, teeth flashing, pinning the attacker's arm. The third man tried to flank them, raising his gun, but Russell shouted, "Drop it, now!" The man hesitated, just long enough for Rex to snarl and charge. Faced with the furious dog and Russell's weapon, he faltered, backing toward the exit. Emily, adrenaline surging, scrambled for the attacker's dropped phone, pressing the emergency dial. "Police! Officer down! Need immediate backup! Warehouse off Mercer and 9th! Hurry!" she shouted, voice cracking. Suddenly, one of the men grabbed her, yanking her back. She twisted, flailing with the pipe, catching him in the ribs. Rex spun, leaping to her defense despite his injured leg. The man screamed as Rex's jaws clamped down, forcing him to let go. Blood smeared the floor, mingling with the rainwater. A siren wailed in the distance, hope cutting through the chaos. The attackers panicked, one stumbling out the door while the other collapsed, clutching his arm. Russell covered the exit, Eyes never leaving the shadows, Emily dropped the pipe, her hands trembling. She reached for Rex, who whimpered softly, favoring his wounded leg, but licking her palm as if to reassure her. "You're okay. You're okay," she whispered, stroking his head. Police cars screeched to a halt outside, doors slamming, shouts filling the night. The remaining attackers fled, disappearing into the darkness as officers poured in, weapons drawn. Russell raised his hands, shouting, "NYPD, friendly!" before holstering his weapon. An officer hurried to Emily, helping her stand. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head, breath coming in ragged bursts. "Rex, he needs help, please." Within minutes, paramedics were tending to Russell and Rex, wrapping wounds and checking vitals. Emily refused to let anyone separate her from Rex, gripping his fur until her knuckles went white. She couldn't stop shaking. The terror, the adrenaline, the desperate fight to survive. It all crashed over her at once. As the chaos ebbed, Emily looked around at the battered warehouse. Blood, broken glass, and discarded weapons littered the ground, a grim testament to how close she'd come to losing everything. But she was still standing. Rex, battered and bleeding, had refused to leave her side. Russell, despite his own injuries, met her eyes and nodded. "You did good," he said quietly. "You both did." Emily wrapped her arms around Rex, burying her face in his fur. For the first time in years, she let herself cry, not out of fear, but out of fierce, aching relief. They'd made it, for now at least. Darkness hung heavy in the narrow alley as Emily, Detective Russell, and Rex emerged from the warehouse's battered side door. The city suddenly feeling impossibly large and empty. Red and blue lights still flickered in the distance, but here, under the muted glow of a broken street lamp, everything felt raw and exposed. The rain had stopped, leaving the world slick and glistening. Every sound amplified, every movement sending a spike of fear through Emily's heart. They moved quickly, desperate to put space between themselves and the crime scene, but nowhere felt safe. Emily's adrenaline had faded, replaced by a cold exhaustion and a sickening worry for Rex, whose limp had worsened. Blood matted his fur, and with every step, he seemed to slow, though his eyes never left Emily's. Russell glanced back at them, his face drawn and pale. "Keep moving. I've called for backup, but we can't stop until we're somewhere secure." His voice was hoarse, but steady. He swept the street with sharp, practiced eyes, always looking for threats. Emily nodded, her arms tightening around Rex. Every instinct screamed at her to protect him, the way he'd protected her. "Come on, buddy," she whispered. "Just a little farther." They slipped through another alley, weaving between overflowing dumpsters and puddles reflecting the fractured city lights. It was then that Emily felt the shift. A coldness, a silence, as if the world were holding its breath. Rex stiffened, hackles up, and before Emily could react, two men stepped from the shadows, guns drawn, faces masked by anger and fear. "On your knees!" one barked, his gun pointed straight at Emily. Russell froze, arms slowly raised, eyes flicking between the attackers and Emily. Emily's mind went blank for a moment, her world reduced to the black circle of the gun barrel and Rex's trembling body pressed against her. Then, training and instinct snapped into place. She dropped to her knees, pulling Rex close. The other man moved behind her, kicking her legs apart, grabbing her wrists. "Don't move!" he snarled. "Or we shoot the dog!" Emily's breath hitched. She could feel Rex vibrating with tension, his eyes locked on hers. She wanted to scream, to fight, but there was no chance. Russell was unarmed, Rex was wounded, and she was helpless. The first man cocked his pistol, pressing it to her head. "Hand over your phone. Now." Emily fumbled for it, her hands shaking so badly she nearly dropped it. She handed it over, praying they wouldn't find the backup files she'd sent to the cloud. The second man rifled through Russell's pockets, tossing his badge aside, sneering. "You thought you could mess with us?" The first man spat. "No one crosses our crew." Emily tried to speak, but the words caught in her throat. Rex let out a low, pleading whine, a sound she'd never heard from him before. She squeezed his fur, tears streaming down her face. The second man pressed his gun to Russell's back. "You got 3 seconds to say goodbye, hero." A moment of silence stretched. Emily felt the world tilt, everything slowing. She looked at Rex, her protector, her only family left. "I'm sorry," she whispered, voice barely audible. Suddenly, a gunshot exploded in the darkness, louder, closer, shattering the moment. But it wasn't aimed at Emily. As the gunman jerked, Rex surged forward, teeth flashing, placing his body between Emily and the weapon. The bullet slammed into Rex's shoulder, sending him sprawling to the ground. "Rex!" Emily screamed, lunging forward. She cradled him in her arms, feeling hot blood soak her hands. The world narrowed to the sound of his labored breathing, the terror in his eyes. "Stay with me. Please, stay with me." The attackers, thrown off by the chaos, scrambled to regain control. The first man leveled his gun at Emily, but she was beyond fear now. Rage and grief burned through her veins. With shaking hands, she reached for the gun that had dropped from the second attacker's grip when Rex bit him. Her fingers closed around cold metal. She aimed, her vision blurry with tears. "Get away from us!" Her voice was fierce, raw, nothing like the scared girl from earlier that night. The men hesitated. The sirens drew closer. Detective Russell, seizing the moment, lunged at the first man, wrestling him to the ground. The second man fled, footsteps echoing down the alley. Emily, shaking, kept the gun trained on the man beneath Russell. "Don't move!" she choked out. She couldn't stop crying. Rage, terror, heartbreak all swirling together. All she could see was Rex, blood staining his fur, breathing shallow and desperate. Police cars screeched into the alley, officers leaping out, weapons drawn. Russell shouted, "NYPD, these are the suspects!" And in a flash, the officers were on them, handcuffing the attacker, securing the area. Paramedics rushed to Emily, gently prying Rex from her arms. "He's losing a lot of blood," one said urgently. "We need to move." "No," Emily sobbed. "Don't let him die, please. He saved my life." She clung to Rex's collar as they loaded him onto a stretcher. One medic squeezed her shoulder. "We'll do everything we can, I promise." Russell knelt beside her, face stricken. "Emily, you did everything right. He wouldn't want you to give up now." Emily rode in the ambulance, gripping Rex's paw, whispering desperate promises. "You can't leave me. Not after all this. You're my family. I need you, Rex." The city blurred past, neon lights streaking the windows. Emily pressed her forehead to Rex's, feeling the thready beat of his heart, the warmth fading from his fur. "Stay with me, buddy. Please, just stay." The ambulance doors slammed, and the world became a blur of sirens and prayers. Emily's tears falling onto Rex's muzzle as they raced through the night, fighting for one more chance. The world dissolved into sirens and fluorescent lights, sharp orders, and the screech of gurney wheels. Emily followed Rex's stretcher through the automatic doors of the emergency animal hospital, her shoes leaving wet, bloody prints across the gleaming floor. The paramedic's words echoed in her head. "He's critical, stay back, we'll do everything we can." But none of it made sense. She clung to Rex's collar and his limp paw until a tech gently pried her fingers loose. "Miss, you can't come past this point," a vet nurse said, voice firm but kind. "We need space to work. You can wait here. He's in the best hands." Emily stumbled into the waiting room, collapsing into a plastic chair. Her hands shook, stained with Rex's blood. The place was sterile and too bright, filled with posters of smiling cats and dogs, and a cheery mural that seemed like a cruel joke. Around her, other owners clutched their pets and whispered, glancing over at the young woman hunched in the corner, face streaked with tears. She barely noticed when Detective Russell arrived, bandaged and pale but alive. He sat beside her, his presence steady but silent, giving her space. For a long time, neither spoke. The clock on the wall ticked louder than any siren. Emily's mind replayed the night's horrors on a loop. The attack, the gunshot, Rex collapsing in her arms. Every time she blinked, she saw his eyes, filled with pain but still searching for her, needing her. She squeezed her fists until her nails bit her palms. "It's my fault," she whispered, barely audible. "If I hadn't taken that picture, if I hadn't dragged him into this." Russell shook his head. "Emily, listen. You didn't drag him into anything. Rex chose you. That's what loyalty looks like." His voice was tired, but certain. "He's a survivor, just like you. He's been through worse and made it back before." But Emily could only think of her father, how she'd been helpless to save him, how loss always seemed to find her. The thought of losing Rex now, after everything, was unbearable. She buried her face in her hands and sobbed quietly, feeling utterly alone. Hours blurred together. Nurses came and went, sometimes offering a cup of water or a reassuring word, but always returning behind the swinging doors. Russell made calls, arranging statements and protection, but Emily barely registered any of it. The only thing she truly heard was the absence of news from the operating room. At one point, a nurse approached, her expression grave. "The bullet missed his heart, but there's internal bleeding. He's lost a lot of blood, and we're doing a transfusion. It's going to be a long night." "Can I see him?" Emily begged. The nurse hesitated, then nodded. Only for a moment. She followed the nurse into the operating area, where Rex lay surrounded by tubes and monitors, his fur shaved around the wound, bandages stark against his skin. He was so still it made her heart ache, but his ear twitched when she spoke his name. "Hey, buddy," she whispered, kneeling beside him. She stroked his paw gently, feeling the weak pulse beneath the bandage. "I'm right here, you're not alone." For a brief second, Rex's eyes fluttered open, hazy but aware. He let out a soft huff, barely audible. Emily pressed her forehead to his. "You can rest now. I've got you. Just hang on a little longer." She stayed until the nurse insisted she leave. Back in the waiting room, Russell offered a small, tired smile. "He's tough, and so are you." But Emily didn't feel tough. She felt hollowed out. She replayed every mistake, every moment she'd failed someone she loved. "I should have protected him," she whispered, voice breaking. "I should have—" Russell put a hand on her shoulder. "You did. You called for help. You stood your ground, and you saved his life as much as he saved yours." As dawn crept through the windows, a weary veterinarian stepped into the waiting area, scrubs spattered with blood. Emily stood so fast her legs nearly gave out. "Is he?" "He made it through surgery," the vet said, voice gentle but exhausted. "It was close. He lost a lot of blood. And he's not out of the woods yet, but he's fighting. He'll need a long recovery and plenty of care." Relief crashed over Emily in a wave that left her sobbing with gratitude. She collapsed into Russell's arms, shaking. "Thank you. Thank you so much." The vet nodded, offering a faint smile. "You can see him soon," For now, let him rest. He's a fighter. You both are. As the sun rose outside, painting the city in gold and pink, Emily slumped against the wall, every bone aching but her spirit flickering with hope. For the first time since her father's death, she realized just how deeply she cared about someone again. Someone who needed her, who depended on her, who had chosen her just as she'd chosen him. She closed her eyes, breathing in the dawn. In that moment, she understood that healing wasn't just about survival. It was about choosing to love, even when you're terrified of loss. She reached for her phone, texting her mother a single sentence. "I'm okay. Rex is fighting. I'm not giving up." She pressed her palm to the glass, looking toward the recovery room where Rex slept. "You saved me," she whispered. "Now I'll do whatever it takes to save you, too." And for the first time in a long while, Emily felt something that almost felt like hope. The days after the attack moved in a blur. Police statements, medical appointments, and reporters' voices at the edge of every memory. The city buzzed with the news of the foiled trafficking ring. But for Emily, life shrank to the rhythm of hospital beeps and the soft rise and fall of Rex's chest. She spent most nights curled up in a stiff plastic chair by his kennel at the veterinary hospital, tracing her fingers through his fur, promising him he wasn't alone. As word of Rex's heroism spread, the little animal hospital became a shrine of gratitude and awe. Flowers, cards, and even dog toys piled up by the front desk. Strangers wrote notes thanking Rex for saving lives, for his bravery, for showing the city what real loyalty looked like. Some even brought treats for Emily, telling her quietly that she was so strong, though she never felt that way herself. Detective Russell visited often, sometimes dropping by after his shift just to check on them both. "The department's talking about a commendation ceremony," he said one afternoon, pulling up a chair. "You two are local heroes now. Don't be surprised if the mayor himself shakes your hand." Emily tried to smile, but it never reached her eyes. "I don't feel like a hero. I'm just grateful Rex is alive." Russell nodded, his gaze lingering on the old scars that marked Rex's body, and the new ones they'd added. "Heroes never do," he said gently. "They just keep going." Rex's recovery was slow but steady. Each day he grew a little stronger, lifting his head to greet Emily, thumping his tail when she came in with his favorite squeaky ball. The staff marveled at his resilience, but Emily saw the pain in his eyes, the way he flinched at sudden noises or stiffened when strangers approached. She recognized it. It was the same way she woke up sweating from nightmares, the same way her hands shook when someone knocked at the door too loudly. The community's celebrations swelled around them. Local news channels aired grainy footage of the warehouse standoff. Social media overflowed with praise for Rex and Emily. Hashtags trended, #Rex the hero, and #Survivor Emily filled comment sections with messages from as far as other states. Well-wishers offered everything from homemade cookies to a year's supply of dog food. One morning, a group of children from a nearby elementary school delivered a giant hand-painted card. "Thank you, Rex, for being brave." The day of the official commendation arrived on a clear, breezy afternoon. The City Hall steps were packed with police, reporters, and a curious crowd. Emily felt exposed in her borrowed dress, hands sweating as she clung to Rex's leash. Russell stood nearby, smiling encouragement, but the crowd's cheers and the pop of cameras made Emily's skin prickle. A city councilman stepped to the microphone. "Today we honor bravery that reminds us what courage really looks like. Emily Parker, for her quick thinking, and Rex, for his sacrifice and devotion. They helped bring down a dangerous criminal ring, saving lives and restoring hope to our city." He pinned a shiny medallion to Rex's collar, then shook Emily's hand. The applause was thunderous. Rex, true to form, pressed close to Emily, ignoring the fuss. When a little girl, one of the children rescued thanks to Emily's evidence, ran up and hugged Rex's neck, Emily felt her heart crack open with gratitude. The city had found healing through their ordeal. For a moment, surrounded by community, Emily almost believed she could too. But behind the celebrations, shadows lingered. Emily found herself waking from nightmares, heart pounding, sweat soaking her pillow. She'd see flashes of the gun, the van's headlights, Rex collapsing. In crowded rooms, she sometimes froze, panic rising when someone moved too fast or raised their voice. Sometimes, she couldn't stop replaying the what-ifs. What if Rex hadn't made it? What if she'd made the wrong decision? What if they came back? She tried to hide it. She smiled for the cameras, laughed with Russell, accepted hugs and thank yous from strangers. But when she was alone with Rex at night, she whispered her fears into his fur, seeking comfort in the steady thump of his tail. One evening, after another panic attack left her shaking on the bathroom floor, Emily realized the wounds went deeper than she wanted to admit. Guilt gnawed at her, over Rex's scars, over the danger she'd brought to everyone around her, over her inability to just move on and be strong. Sometimes she wondered if she'd ever truly feel safe again. Russell, seeing the strain behind her smiles, gently encouraged her to get help. "Trauma isn't weakness," he told her quietly one night as they walked Rex through the moonlit park. "You're allowed to feel this. You're allowed to need help. Healing isn't something you do alone." With his support, Emily reached out. She began therapy, started journaling, and joined a local support group for crime survivors. She found solace in sharing her story, in hearing others echo her pain and hope. Each time she spoke, her voice grew a little steadier, her nightmares a little less vivid. Still, she never let go of her guilt over Rex's injuries. On nights when his limp slowed him down or a loud noise made him flinch, she apologized again and again, tears slipping silently down her cheeks. But Rex, ever loyal, would press his nose into her palm, as if to say, "We're both still here. We're both still fighting." As the city's applause faded and life returned to its old rhythms, Emily and Rex faced each new day together, healing, hurting, but always, always moving forward. Autumn bled into winter, and with each passing week, Emily's life slowly began to stitch itself back together, though never in quite the same shape as before. The adrenaline and chaos faded, replaced by a slow, fragile search for something that resembled normal. The old Emily, the one who felt like she could handle anything alone, now realized how much she depended on the warmth of others, and most of all, the loyal presence of Rex. Their days took on a gentle rhythm. Mornings began with sunlight spilling across her apartment's kitchen floor, where Rex would stretch and yawn, still favoring his injured leg. Emily brewed coffee, toasted bread, and talked to him like he was family, sometimes about the weather, sometimes about her dreams, sometimes just to fill the silence. When she felt a wave of anxiety begin to rise, she'd sit on the floor, burying her hands in Rex's fur until her breathing steadied. Therapy became part of her weekly routine. At first, she hated every second, sitting in a stranger's office, forced to speak her pain aloud. But little by little, the therapist's patient questions and gentle encouragement chipped away at her guilt and fear. She learned that trauma wasn't something you got over with enough willpower. It was a wound you learned to live with, day by day. The therapist helped her understand how the past tried to rewrite the present, and how she could take her life back, one choice at a time. But the truest healing came from connection. At Detective Russell's suggestion, Emily started speaking at a local support group for survivors. The first night, her hands shook so badly she nearly dropped her notes. She sat in a circle of strangers, each carrying invisible scars. Her voice wavered as she described the attack, the terror, the guilt she still carried over Rex's wounds. She expected pity or discomfort, but instead, she found only understanding, heads nodding, gentle words, and even laughter at the right moments. In that small, fluorescent-lit room, Emily realized she was no longer alone. Rex became something of a celebrity at the group. On the nights he accompanied her, survivors and their families greeted him with affection and awe. For many, Rex symbolized the hope that even the most broken among them could fight back and find peace again. His presence made people smile, made children feel safe, and with every meeting, Emily felt the power of their shared vulnerability. The way people, like dogs, chose to trust again, even after being hurt. At home, Emily and Rex found new rituals for comfort. On restless nights, when the world felt overwhelming, she'd bundle up in her old parka, leash Rex, and walk with him through the quiet city streets. They'd sit on a bench in the little park near the river, watching the water shimmer beneath the moon. Rex would rest his head on her lap, eyes half closed, content just to be there. Emily would talk, sometimes to him, sometimes to her father's memory, sometimes to herself. The city that once felt so dangerous began, little by little, to feel like home again. Then, one cold Saturday morning, Emily received an invitation that made her breath catch. The city was honoring Rex at a public event in the downtown square. She hesitated at first, dreading the idea of crowds and attention. But she thought of all the families who'd been rescued because of the evidence she'd gathered, and of Rex, who had risked everything to protect her. She decided to go, hoping that maybe this time the celebration would feel like healing, not exposure. The square was alive with music and laughter. Local officials shook her hand. Grateful citizens brought their children to meet Rex. News cameras flashed, but Emily kept her focus on the faces around her. Ordinary people who'd shown up not for the spectacle but to say thank you. As she knelt beside Rex on the makeshift stage, a little girl she recognized from the survivors group approached, eyes wide with admiration. "He's really brave," the girl whispered, reaching out to stroke Rex's fur. Emily smiled, tears shining in her eyes. "He is. But you know what? So are you. It takes a lot of courage to keep going after something scary." The girl nodded, hugging Rex tightly. In that moment, Emily felt the chain of hope their ordeal had forged, connecting her to this child, to every survivor, to every person who'd found a reason to believe in goodness again. After the ceremony, as the crowd thinned and the winter sun dipped low, Emily and Rex sat on the stage steps, watching the world go by. She thought of everything they'd survived, the violence, the fear, the pain, and of the community that had surrounded them with love and support. She reached for Rex, pulling him close, feeling his steady heartbeat and the gentle puff of his breath against her cheek. "We made it," she whispered. "You and me. We're family now." Rex thumped his tail and pressed against her side. Emily smiled, the kind of smile that comes from deep within, a smile that meant she was finally, truly home. And as dusk settled on the city, Emily understood what her father had tried to teach her so many years ago, that home wasn't just a place. It was the people and the animals you chose, the ones who chose you back. It was the safety you built, even out of broken pieces. And with Rex by her side, Emily knew she'd never have to face the world alone again. The new year brought more than just a change in the weather. It brought a sense of possibility, as if the world itself was offering Emily and Rex another chance. But true healing, she discovered, was neither quick nor easy. The journey from surviving to living again was long, marked by setbacks and quiet victories. Emily had learned to embrace both. Her work with the support group deepened. At first, she'd only intended to sit in the circle and share her pain, to be one story among many. But as weeks passed, survivors and their families began to look to her for hope. The community center invited her to speak at a conference for trauma survivors, a gathering of people from across the state who'd lived through violence, loss, and unimaginable fear. Emily hesitated, daunted by the thought of speaking to hundreds of strangers. But then she remembered that night in the alley, Rex at her side, wounded and loyal, and realized her story might offer comfort to someone else standing on the same ledge she once had. The morning of the conference, Emily stood backstage, clutching her speech. The air buzzed with nervous energy. Through the curtain, she could see the audience, survivors, social workers, police officers, and even children, each one carrying their own invisible scars. Rex sat calmly at her feet, his presence steady and grounding. When her name was called, Emily's heart hammered in her chest, but she drew strength from Rex, from Russell who sat in the front row, and from every memory of surviving when it seemed impossible. She stepped to the podium, took a deep breath, and began. Most people think loyalty is just a feeling, something that happens without thinking. But I've learned that real loyalty is a choice. It's not about instinct, not really. It's about risking yourself for someone else, even when you're scared. Sometimes that risk comes with a cost. Her voice trembled but grew stronger. She recounted the attack, the nights in the hospital, and the guilt she'd carried over Rex's wounds. He risked everything for me, not because he was trained to, but because he chose me again and again in the darkness and the chaos. And I chose him too. The room was silent, every face attentive. Emily pressed on, weaving her father's memory into her story. She spoke of the years after his death, of the wall she'd built around her heart, to keep from getting hurt again. For a long time I thought being strong meant never needing anyone. But it was Rex, a survivor of war and loss himself, who taught me the truth. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's what you do while you're scared. It's letting yourself hope, even when you're not sure you can survive another loss. Emily scanned the room and saw tears in the eyes of strangers. Healing doesn't happen alone. I learned that when I started sharing my pain with others, when I let people like Detective Russell and my support group help me carry the weight. The more I shared, the lighter it became until hope started to grow where pain used to be. She paused, letting the words settle. We are all survivors, but we are also protectors. Every one of us has the power to stand between darkness and light, for ourselves and for others. Sometimes it's not the strongest who save the day, but the ones who refuse to leave someone behind. She ended with a quiet, powerful message. If you ever doubt your worth, or wonder if you can make a difference, remember Rex. Sometimes, the one you save is the one who saves you back. Applause rose, slow at first, then swelling to fill the auditorium. Emily stepped away from the podium, heart racing with a strange new feeling. Pride, yes, but also peace. She realized that sharing her story, raw and unvarnished, was an act of courage too. After the speech, people gathered around her, hugging her, thanking her, asking to pet Rex. Survivors shared their own stories, the room filling with a quiet solidarity that defied the isolation of trauma. One woman, her voice trembling, said, "You made me believe I could heal too." A teenage boy, eyes red from tears, knelt to hug Rex. "I want to be brave like him," he whispered. Later, Emily and Rex sat outside on the center's steps, watching the sun dip behind the city skyline. Russell joined them, handing Emily a cup of coffee. "You did good in there," he said, nudging her shoulder. Emily smiled, a genuine warmth in her chest. "I just told the truth." Russell nodded. "Sometimes that's the bravest thing." They sat in companionable silence for a while, the sounds of laughter and conversation drifting out from the conference hall. Emily glanced down at Rex, who gazed up at her with unshakable devotion. "You know, I used to think broken things stayed broken," she mused. "But maybe healing just means finding new ways to put the pieces together." Russell sipped his coffee, thoughtful. "Sometimes the cracks make us stronger." That night, Emily returned home with Rex. She wrote in her journal, the words flowing easily. "Loyalty is a choice. Courage is a practice. Healing is a journey you don't have to walk alone. And love is what gives us the strength to keep going, even after the world has knocked us down." She set her pen down, looked at Rex curled beside her bed, and whispered, "Thank you for choosing me." For the first time in a long time, Emily felt whole. Not because the pain had vanished, but because she had survived it. And she had done it together, with Rex, her protector, her family, her friend. Sunlight streamed through Emily's window, spilling golden across the wooden floor as she woke to the sound of gentle panting and the soft jingle of Rex's new collar tag. For the first time in months, the morning felt ordinary, and that ordinary felt like a small miracle. Rex stretched at the foot of the bed, his old wounds healing, his tail thumping the comforter with an easy joy that made Emily smile. She lay there for a moment, listening to the soft sounds of the world waking up. Birds in the tree outside, the distant laughter of neighbors, the slow rumble of city buses rolling by. In the kitchen, coffee brewed. Her phone buzzed with messages from friends she'd made at the support group. Just simple good mornings and how are you feeling? But they filled her with gratitude. Community, she realized, was built from these tiny gestures, these daily reminders that no one was alone. Rex patted over, placing his head on the mattress and gazing up at her with those wise amber eyes. Emily scratched behind his ears, feeling the familiar weight of his loyalty, his unspoken understanding. "Ready for your walk, big guy?" she whispered. They made their way to the park as the city came alive. Sunlight flickered through autumn leaves, dappling the path in gold and amber. Children ran across the grass, their laughter bright and unafraid. For the first time, Emily didn't glance over her shoulder, didn't tense at every shout or sudden movement. She breathed in the crisp air, letting it fill her lungs, letting herself belong to this peaceful morning. As they reached the playground, a group of kids called out, waving. "Hi, Rex!" they shouted. Their parents smiled at Emily, some of them nodding with recognition. Neighbors who'd read about her and Rex in the local paper, who'd sent casseroles and cards in the aftermath, or quietly watched out for her on nights when she still flinched at footsteps. One small boy toddled up and wrapped his arms around Rex's neck. Rex lowered his head, tail wagging, letting the child hug him tight. Emily knelt beside them, remembering a time when the world had felt impossibly cruel and cold. Now, the warmth of community, of children's laughter and neighbors' kindness, washed over her like sunlight. After the park, they walked past the old shelter where Emily had first found Rex, the stray no one seemed to want. The building's faded mural had been restored, thanks to a donation drive that began after their story went public. Painted across the bricks were dogs and children, flowers and bright blue skies, a testament to hope, to second chances. The shelter director stepped outside, waving at Emily. "Still our best adoption ever," she called, smiling at Rex. Emily grinned. "He saved my life, you know." The director nodded. "You saved each other." Later, at a coffee shop, Emily met with Detective Russell, who had become more like family than just a friend. They sat by the window, sipping coffee and watching Rex nap in a patch of sunlight by their feet. "You look good, Emily," Russell said, his voice gentle. "Peace suits you." Emily smiled. "I never thought I'd find it again. Not after everything. But I think I'm finally home." Russell nodded. "You made it through, and you helped a lot of people find hope along the way." She looked at Rex, then at Russell, her eyes bright. "I used to think home was just a place to hide from the world. But it's not. It's where you're truly known, where you feel safe. It's the people and the animals you choose and who choose you in return." They talked about the journey, the violence and the fear, yes, but also the moments of grace, the unexpected kindness, and the slow, stubborn rebuilding of trust. Emily shared how therapy, friendship, and community had helped her understand that healing wasn't a destination, but a process. "It comes in waves," she said softly. "Some days I still struggle, but most days I wake up grateful, not just for surviving, but for the second chance to really live." Russell finished his coffee, smiling. "You and Rex, you're proof that the most broken among us can be the bravest." The sun was high when Emily and Rex returned home. The apartment was filled with little reminders of their journey. Get well cards, Rex's commendation medallion, books from fellow survivors. The battered pipe she'd swung that night in the warehouse now hung on a hook by the door. Not as a weapon, but as a symbol of courage. On the kitchen counter, Rex's new tag caught the light. Instead of a number, it read simply, "Family." That afternoon, Emily watched from her window as Rex played with a group of neighborhood children in the courtyard, chasing after a bright red ball, barking with pure, boundless joy. She felt tears prick her eyes, not of pain, but of deep, unshakable happiness. She went outside, kneeling beside Rex as he trotted over, tail wagging, muzzle damp with morning dew. She hugged him tightly, whispering, "You were never just a weapon, Rex. You're my family. Thank you for coming home with me." For a long moment, the world seemed to pause, the sun warm on her face, Rex's heartbeat steady against her chest, the laughter of children ringing out like a promise. Emily realized she was no longer driven by fear, no longer looking for the next threat around the corner. She was, finally, at peace. As dusk fell, she sat on the porch, watching the stars appear one by one. She thought of her father, of Russell, of every person who had touched her life during the hardest months she'd ever known. She thought of the courage it took to trust again, to reach out, to let herself be loved. Her story, and Rex's, was proof that loyalty, love, and courage could overcome even the deepest scars. Proof that second chances were real, not just for people, but for dogs. And as the world quieted, Emily whispered a promise to herself and to Rex. "We're home, we're safe, and together, we're stronger than anything the world can throw at us." There, side by side in the gathering night, Emily and Rex rested. No longer just survivors, but family, surrounded by hope, community, and the healing light of second chances.